Today we're going to discuss job applications, and in addition to preparing the resume, we'll also go over the job application letter, also known as a cover letter, as well as a few interview do's and don'ts that may be helpful to you. So you'll notice that my subtitle here is to compete on your own terms. What do I mean by
It's all about you, a million dreams and more.
Well, no, that is definitely not what I mean. Sorry to be the one to tell you this, but it's really all about them. It's all about the organization to which you are applying for the job. And it's really important to bear this in mind because all too often applicants write from their own perspective. They think a great deal about what they want from a particular job, but the employer doesn't really care what the applicant wants. The employer wants to know how the applicant can contribute to the company's success in a way that no one else can. So what you need to do is exhibit those unique individual characteristics that distinguish you from all the other applicants out there. That means not writing the same things that everyone else does. You need to bridge the gap between your perspective and your reader's perspective. So, where to begin? The first step is to research what the employer is looking for. Many job titles don't really reflect what the person holding that job title will actually do, so you need to read the full description and think very carefully about how you can fulfill the requirements. You need to tailor each and every resume and cover letter to match that job description as precisely as possible. Of course, this means more work on your part because you can't simply create a generic resume and send it out to anyone and everyone. Instead, your goal is to show how you specifically are qualified for this job. I would also recommend creating a keyword list because most resumes are screened electronically for those keywords by a computer before a human ever sees them. If the computer happens to weed out certain resumes, then a human may never see them. If you're not really comfortable with a keyword list, what you can do is figure out a way to work those keywords into your job descriptions, work history, and other qualifications. The top of the resume should always have a heading, and the heading should include clear information on who you are and how the recruiter can get in touch with you. That includes the postal address, along with an email address and a phone number. You really only need one phone number. It's probably best to provide the number of your mobile phone or cell phone, since normally you'll have that device with you and it will be the easiest way for the recruiter to get in touch with you. Be sure that you're using a professional voicemail greeting on your phone. Your email address should also convey a sense of professionalism. Usually it should be something like first name, last name, at whatever your domain or internet service provider happens to be. Keep it professional and keep it classy, you might say. Yes, that does seem like common sense, but it's amazing how often people can and do overlook the obvious. Do you need a job objective? Maybe yes, maybe no. If you're changing careers, if you've been out of the workforce for a while and are coming back after an absence, if you're seeking an entry-level job or seeking a highly specialized position, then yes, it wouldn't hurt to include one. Again, what you need to do is be sure that your job objective matches the information for the company to which you're applying. If none of those conditions apply to you, then you use a qualifications summary by all means, but do so carefully. I'll go into what I mean by that in a minute or two, but first a little more about the job objective. What should you include? Well, the specific job title, department, or area, and the area of specialization. For example, let's suppose that you are applying to be a registered nurse. That would not be a job objective. Instead, you want to explain if you're interested in working in the critical care unit or in cardiac care or some other specialized area. This is why it's important to tailor the objective for each application, so the recruiter can see exactly what it is you're looking for, whether it exactly matches the job openings they have, and decide where to go from there. Always emphasize what you can contribute to the organization. This is not the place to talk about what you want. Again, it seems like common sense, but people can and do overlook the obvious. So check and recheck that you are really sending the right resume with the right job objective to the right organization. I work in the neuroscience graduate program here at UC. We received an application for the graduate program. In this person's personal statement, he mentioned that it had always been his dream to go to Vanderbilt. So why he was sending an application to the University of Cincinnati is anyone's guess, but as you can see, even the most educated people can put themselves into an awkward situation if they don't take the time to check and recheck. Of course, you're not going to make that mistake because I'm here to remind you. Well, it's not really all about me either, but getting on. What should you include in a qualification summary? Well, obviously, your qualifications and how they make you the perfect fit for the job. This isn't the place to provide generic words and phrases such as team player, enthusiastic, or seeking a challenging position or something like that. Why not? Because anyone can say these things. What you want to do is use concrete terms that will make the recruiter want to read more. Just as you would with any document, you need to persuade the reader to actually read it. Find a way to introduce yourself that will intrigue the reader and make him or her want to find out more about why you're the most qualified person for the job. What should you write next? After you have your heading with your name and contact information, followed by your job objective or qualification summary? Well, it depends. For most new graduates, the education section would come next, but maybe you have some work experience that really qualifies you for the job you want, in which case you would list that next. Whichever section comes next, it should be clearly labeled so that the recruiter can find the information quickly and easily. Let's suppose you're putting the education section next. You would list your most recent education first, so that would be UC, and you would list your major, what degree you're seeking, and your expected graduation date. This may be a good place to include any courses that may be especially relevant to the job you want, as well as anything that would reinforce your qualifications. This could be things like scholarships, any honors or awards, any certifications you have, etc. And since you're attending university, it's really quite obvious that you've attended high school and graduated, so there's really no need to mention that unless you have some specific honor or award that will somehow reinforce your qualifications for the job that you want. For work experience, again, list your current or most recent work experience first, then list your earlier experiences in reverse chronological order. So, let's suppose that you have a current job and you started working there in 2012. You would write 2012 to present, then the next most recent job would be 2010, 2012, and so on and on. I recommend not going back further than 10 years, unless you want to highlight a previous position that qualifies you for the job you want now. Why is that? Jobs that you had 10 years ago probably won't be relevant to the job you want now for one reason. For another, you want to avoid age discrimination to the extent possible. Keeping the resume at the 10-year limit makes it more difficult for the reader to think, oh, this person's been in the workforce for 20 or 30 years. They're not going to want to accept a low salary, or they'll be bored with this position, or whatever excuse it is that they may make. You want to not give them that excuse. Also, when you list work experience, provide the name of the company where you worked with the city and state. Simply stating that you worked at McDonald's, for example, won't tell the reader anything because they're all over the world. So mention where you worked, what your job title was, and your dates of employment. Underneath this information, try to provide some specific details that will reinforce your qualifications for the job that you want now. These could be accomplishments, promotions, any special equipment used, and so on. For example, lots of people like to say they are team players. Instead of saying what anyone could say, if there was a particular time when teamwork came in handy, or that you did an exemplary job with the team while you were at work, then why not mention that under work experience? Then you can actually prove you're a team player instead of providing a generic statement which may or may not mean much of anything. Activities. Some people like to mention that they played high school lacrosse or baseball or something else. Well, that's great, but what does it have to do with the job that you want? Maybe not much of anything. Unless you want to go work for the Cincinnati Reds or whoever the lacrosse people happen to be. Whatever activities you do list, be careful not to include any information that could potentially be used to discriminate against you. As you may know, it is illegal for any recruiter to ask you questions such as, are you married or single, or how many children you have, or what your national origin is, or what is your sexual orientation, and so on. And granted, activities that reflect those characteristics may be important to you, but they really don't belong on a resume because they have nothing to do with your ability to function as a professional on the job. If you are a member of a professional organization, feel free to list that information. For instance, you may be a member of the American Society of Student Mechanical Engineers or the Medical Student Organization or something like that, and those are perfectly acceptable and really should be listed in an activity section of a resume because they indicate your interest in your major field. Should you list references? There are varying schools of thought on this. I have seen textbooks which only show example resumes with references listed. I personally advise against it until the recruiter asks for them. Because, in my experience, when a recruiter asks for references, it means that they actually are considering you for the job, and you can alert those who have agreed to provide references for you that someone will be getting in touch with them. Otherwise, if you send them up front, you never really know if they will be contacted at all. Or if they are, they may be caught off guard and won't quite know what to say. This is also a reason you should be sure that individuals agree to provide a recommendation or reference for you in advance before you list them on a resume, and definitely before you tell recruiters to contact them. Try to use professional references that can cite your qualifications for the job you want, and maybe either know or can predict how you will function in the job you want. Ethics note it's a good idea to avoid using personal friends or family members as references. Generally speaking, you want to show off your experience, your certifications, achievements, education, and either a well-written professional summary or job objective that will get the reader's attention. So you'll want to present the most impressive information first. Use action words and verbs as much as possible. Use parallel construction in bulleted lists. And once again, parallel means having each bullet point begin with the same form. For instance, each of these begins with a verb. Leave out irrelevant information. Proofread for correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation. Reading your resume out loud is a very good way to catch awkward grammar or words you've accidentally omitted and other errors that will make your document seem less professional. You should also have someone else proofread it for you. What about social media? If you have a LinkedIn profile, be sure that it's up to date and accurate, and check and recheck that the information on your resume is consistent with your LinkedIn profile. Employers can and will notice any discrepancies. If you use Facebook for, social media instead of establishing a professional presence, be sure to adjust your privacy settings, especially if you have content that you wouldn't want a prospective employer to see. I would recommend doing that anyway, because some information is really none of your prospective employer's business. Also, avoid being a troll, especially a Twitter troll, meaning that you shouldn't log on and start ranting or personally attacking and insulting others on social media, because if an employer happens to look up information or run across some of these posts, it would not make a very favorable impression. I'll post a few examples on our Blackboard site to demonstrate what I mean by this. Documents can be designed to be more appealing, as you learned in the previous module, and you should bear that in mind. You'll want to use headings, layouts, and other design tools that will help your readers find information quickly and easily. It's important for you to have information presented clearly, concisely, and in a way that will get the recruiter's attention. Using too little white space or crowding a lot of information on a resume will make it difficult to read. If you have lots of details, you can probably include them in the cover letter. On the other hand, too much white space implies too little substance, and that should also be avoided. Can resumes be longer than one page? Yes, they can. And applicants with more than 10 years of experience routinely have 2 pages. Those with publications, patents, or other special technical skills may have 3 or more pages. Senior executives will have longer resumes too, because they use them to document a path of progression, demonstrating how they got where they are today. Ethical considerations. In addition to avoid asking friends or family members to serve as references, resist the temptation to exaggerate or embellish on a resume. Employers can, and often do, verify information before making an offer. If they find out you've been somewhat less than truthful on the resume, they can dismiss you before you even get started or rescind the offer. This is also why you should not take sole credit for team accomplishments. Here is another check and recheck. Ensure your job titles that you list on your resume and on LinkedIn match what the HR departments at your previous jobs will tell employers that it was. So if the work you did doesn't really fit with the job title, you can explain what you did, but it's important to be truthful and accurate in these things. In fact, I do know of one person who had a job offer rescinded because, when Human Resources called to verify his previous job title, what he wrote on his resume didn't match what Human Resources said. Maybe his job title more accurately reflected what he did, but that's neither here nor there. It's important to have everything match up. Also, explain any gaps in your employment history. For instance, maybe you took time off to finish your degree or for some other reason. You can even say laid off, seeking further training, etc. Many people have gaps, especially after the economic downturns of recent years. So it's not necessarily a strike against you, but you should make an effort to explain why it exists. Avoid resume cliches. As I stated, when you write a job objective or qualifications summary, don't have a follow-the-herd mentality, meaning don't write what everyone else writes. People love to say they're hardworking or good team players or have good work ethics. Well, maybe they do, but everyone says that, and anyone could say that. Instead, provide examples demonstrating that you're a team player. Prove that you're proactive in your cover letter. Describe a situation where you were. Here are some more. Instead of using results-oriented professional, well, who isn't? Provide an example of how you get results. Instead of stating you possess organizational skills, provide an example of how those skills made a difference. Don't say you're seeking a challenging position. Have you ever heard anyone saying they're seeking a boring position? No, I don't suppose you have. Instead, simply stick to the specific job title that you want. Also, avoid extraneous details. Not only does the recruiter have to waste time reading those extraneous details, but you could be using that space to promote yourself or to provide examples of what a hard-working team player with organizational skills that you really are. So things like salary negotiable are unnecessary. All salaries are negotiable and everyone knows that. Also stating references available upon request. Well, everyone knows that, and if they are sufficiently interested in you to ask for references, they will. Stating the obvious is unnecessary. Here are some quotes from real resumes. For example, job title Assistant Manger. Perfectionist who rarely, if ever, misses details. Interest, donating blood, 14 gallons so far. Yes, these are real. And I am providing them here as rather humorous examples of what not to do, but also to emphasize the importance of proofreading. If you're afraid you're missing something, then have a friend or family member proofread for you. You can take a moment to read your resume out loud, even if you just whisper it to yourself. It will make it much easier to find potential mistakes or grammatical errors, or simply bits of awkward phrasing that you could revise. Bear in mind that these documents are introducing you as a professional, so you want them to be well formatted, error-free, and presenting you in the best possible light. Having discussed resumes, and of course you've prepared your resume, you've proofread it, you've proofread it again, you've reviewed it, you've read it aloud, and you've had someone else proofread it for you, haven't you? Of course you have. So, let's move on now to the job application letter, also known as the cover letter. Now, the nomenclature really isn't as important as the function. In other words, it's not what you call it, it's what you do with it that matters. And along with the resume, the letter's purpose is to get you an in-person interview. Just as you would with the resume, do some preliminary research. Conduct a rhetorical analysis. Yes, there's that phrase again. And determine to the extent possible what the employer is looking for. You want to learn enough about the specific job and the company to tailor that letter so that it exactly matches to the greatest extent possible the job and its description. It does take some extra effort, but when you think about how many generic resumes and letters employers receive every single day, you can see why making that extra effort to stand out from the crowd is worthwhile. And this is especially true if you've addressed your cover letter to the hiring manager instead of the generic "Dear Sir" or "Madam" or "to whom it may concern." Finding out the name of the actual hiring manager will make a much better impression because it shows you've actually done some research and tried to find out more about the company than just, oh look, there's a job, I'm going to apply for it. This is not simply a pet peeve of mine. I've done a survey and people agree that one of the most annoying things you can do is write a letter or an email beginning with, "Hello, my name is," whatever it is. For one thing, if you're sending it in an email, I can already see the name in my inbox. So I've never really understood why anyone would want to waste a further 5 or 10 seconds of a reader's time by stating the obvious, "Hello, my name is," whatever. It's also written right there on your resume, along with your contact information. And bear in mind again that recruiters spend an average of about 30 to 45 seconds reading the application materials that you've worked so hard to perfect. So don't waste your reader's time. Write the email just as you would a cover letter. In the opening paragraph, clearly state what position you're applying for and how you're qualified for it, because your reader is not going to take the time to try and guess. Persuade the employer that you're really interested in working for that particular organization. You can do this by citing some specific relevant facts about the organization and conveying your enthusiasm for the job. Here you want to stress what contributions you can make to the organization. And again, don't waste more precious seconds on belaboring the obvious, such as enclosed is my resume, or I am seeking a challenging position. You'll want to use the cover letter to reinforce your unique qualifications. You could also use it to provide more information than you can fit in your resume. You want to explain how your unique knowledge, skills, and abilities are relevant to the job you want and how they make you a good fit for the organization. Also, indicate why it is that you want to work at that specific organization. Yes, maybe you are desperate to get a job, anywhere, but an employer is going to sense that kind of desperation. Instead, do your best to convey enthusiasm for that particular company and emphasize why you would fit in there well. In closing, remember to thank the reader for his or her consideration. You may want to reinforce your awareness of the company's goals and how you can help the company achieve them, and establish a plan to follow up. Using phrases such as, would it be possible to arrange an interview, or please contact me if you want to interview me, show that you're passive and that you may not be as interested in the job as the recruiter may have hoped you were. Instead, you should demonstrate your interest by stating when you will contact the recruiter and be sure to follow through. A few general tips here. Again, just as we have discussed ad nauseum throughout the course so far, write clearly. Use sentences of varying length and structure to emphasize certain points. Be sure the letter is organized so that it's easy to read and follow. Use strong, action-oriented verbs. Try to come across as confident without being pushy, which means that you should convey that you are confident you can do the job without trying to be arrogant about it. And again, check and recheck. Match the right cover letter with the right resume and send it to the right recruiter. And as with your resume, use correct spelling, grammar, punctuation. I cannot say it often enough, proofread, and then proofread again. Read your letter aloud, have someone else proofread it for you. Follow the elements of effective visual design that we have discussed before. Make your letter look professional and attractive, and include all the necessary elements of a business letter, even if you are sending it via email. And we'll conclude with some quotes from real cover letters. Statements like, you will want me to be your head honcho in no time, and let's meet so you can ooh and ah over my experience, are confident and pushy. So, if you were wondering exactly what I meant by that, now you know. I also emphasize the importance of grammar, so writing sentence fragments like strong writing abilities, able to analysis data and problem solve, don't really demonstrate strong writing abilities because this person has never even learned how to use grammar properly. Neither has, not only am I creative, I am a very hard-working. I'm a very hard-working what? Robot? Who knows? we'll probably never know, because I very much doubt that this person ever got an interview. Now let's talk about job interviews. This is a really important part of the entire job application process, and in many instances it's not covered very well in textbooks. So let's try to answer the question why they should hire you, and what we can do to improve the chances. Well, as with the resume and the cover letter, you need to do some advanced preparation. Now, when you're called for an interview, find out something about the people you're going to meet. If at all possible, you can maybe check their LinkedIn profile or the company's website, or perhaps some other professional networks. And the reason I suggest this is because you may be able to establish some rapport with the interviewers if you have some interests in common. And it's also a good idea to review the company's website anyway, especially if you've applied for more than one job there, because you want to be sure you're preparing for the right interview. Double check directions and parking before the interview day, even if you have a vague idea of where the interview site is located. Even if you've been there before, check again. Do yourself a favor, because the last thing you want to do is risk being late because of road construction or road closures, or even because you got lost because of the road construction or closures. And be sure that the clothing you plan to wear is clean and ironed. It's common sense, yes, but in the excitement and nervousness over getting an interview, people can and often do overlook the obvious. Be sure you review your resume and your cover letter, because you can bet that the interviewers are going to be asking you about the contents of these documents, and you'll want to review how your knowledge, skills, and abilities match the job requirements. If you have supporting documentation, be sure to have it handy. For instance, if you have certifications or continuing education credits or any other qualifications, the recruiter may request those, so you'll want to have extra copies on hand, or at the very least be able to send them to the recruiter later on. You'll also want to start thinking about questions to ask during the interview. If the recruiter says, "Do you have any questions for me?" and you say no, then it indicates that you're not really interested in the organization or the job. And the last thing you want is to appear to be simply going through the motions. Now, one way to think of it is like this. You're the interviewee, yes, and the company recruiter is interviewing you, but you need to interview the recruiter as well. There's nothing worse than getting a job only to find out it makes you miserable and it's not really the right place for you. So use the interview as an opportunity to be sure that this particular position is one you really want. So by asking questions, you can get a sense of the corporate culture and find out what the company expects from its employees. It is considered very bad form to ask about salary and benefits in an interview. Now, the recruiter may tell you, but you should never bring it up first, because you want to convey that you're interested in the job primarily and what you can contribute to the organization. If you can, follow up on some comment the interviewer has made, because it shows you were listening actively and that you were actually interested in what the interviewer was saying. And a few other examples of questions you could ask are things like, what do you like best about working here? Have there been issues with staff turnover? And if there have, think of ways that you could perhaps help solve that problem. You could ask, what's the biggest challenge facing the organization? And then, of course, you would need to offer possible solutions to help them meet the challenge. You could ask, can you tell me about the team I'll be working with? Phrasing it that way allows the interviewer to envision you in the job. Ask who previously held this position and maybe what became of him or her. If the person advanced in the company, well, great. Maybe you can ask what qualifications they had to advance, so you could be thinking about advancing yourself. Or if that person left under bad circumstances, maybe you could find out what mistakes the person made so you can avoid them. Also, towards the end, ask if you could provide any further information about your qualifications. Be sure that the interviewer isn't hesitant about you for some reason. And of course, it's essential to ask what are the next steps in the process, because again, you are conveying to the interviewer that you really want the job, and the interviewer may tell you how many other people have applied, or what your status is, or some other clues that you can use to establish a follow-up plan. What happens on the interview day? Dress appropriately. You should probably plan on wearing a business suit or at least something that looks dressy but conservative. You should never go to a job interview in scrubs. If you're going to wear a skirt, it should be knee-length or longer, and you should be able to walk while you're wearing it, which also means wear flats or low heels. You don't want to be stumbling during the interview or on the way to the interview. Keep jewelry to a minimum. Avoid wearing clothing that's too tight, and some organizations do frown on piercings and tattoos, so remove or cover them, at least until you find out how tolerant or not the corporate culture happens to be. Be sure you're well groomed. Observe good hygiene, which can simply mean showering on the day of or the evening before. Be careful not to use colognes or perfumes because many people have allergies to them. Don't forget to take extra copies of your resume and any other supporting documentation along with you, and also take a notepad and a pen so that you can make some notes, because you can bet that the people interviewing you will be doing the same, and it further conveys an interest in the position. If you happen to arrive more than 15 minutes early, do one of two things. Either wait outside, take a short walk around the building, weather permitting, or visit the restroom to freshen up and further mentally prepare yourself. Being too early creates as bad an impression as being late. I've seen applicants turn up for interviews an entire hour before they're scheduled to meet with a recruiter, and this creates a really bad impression. For one thing, it suggests that you have very poor time management skills, and it also creates an extra burden on reception, because reception has to find a place to put you for all that extra time, and you may wind up in a waiting room with other applicants who are being seen before you, which is rather awkward for everyone. Be polite to everyone you meet, whether it's the CEO or the janitor. I can tell you about an applicant who arrived in reception and began complaining very abusively to the person at the reception desk, complaining about the weather, complaining about how far he had to walk from his car to the building, and about the directions he received, and so on, only to find that the person he thought was the receptionist was in fact the person who was going to be interviewing him, and the interviewer just happened to be filling in for the receptionist for a few minutes. So be polite, don't whine, and bear in mind that the person you're meeting may not be the person you think he or she is. In Western cultures, it's customary to smile, make eye contact, and offer a firm handshake to the interviewer. During the interview, answer the interviewer's questions as directly and concisely as possible. You don't want to ramble because that will indicate a lack of preparation. Now, interviewers expect applicants to be a bit nervous, but the better prepared you are, the more confident you can appear. Always, always, always turn off your cell phone. If you absolutely have to leave it on, at least put it on vibrate or silent mode. Better still, if you've driven to the interview, leave it in the car. As with not complaining to reception, don't complain about previous jobs. Even if the job was terrible, interviews are never an appropriate venue for complaining about a previous employer. Maybe it was terrible, but at least try to say that it was a learning experience, or that you learned how to deal with some situation or accomplish something, but no complaining, okay? And try to stay relaxed and confident in your verbal replies as well as your non-verbal communication, which simply means no tapping your foot, don't twiddle your thumbs, or run your hands through your hair, or other nervous tics that may betray a lack of confidence to the interviewer. Interview questions that the interviewer will ask will probably involve confirming information you've provided on your resume and application letter, which is perfectly normal. But the current trend is to ask more probing, in-depth questions. This is because the recruiter wants to get an idea of what you're really like as a person and what you've learned from your education and your experiences. Your answers will tell the interviewer how you've applied the knowledge that you've acquired through your education and experience, and it also tells them about your personality and work habits. And the interviewer is asking these questions to help him or her decide whether you'll be a good fit for the job and for the company's work environment or corporate culture. Here are a few typical interview questions, and there are dozens, if not hundreds, of websites that will introduce you to many more. In fact, if you check our Canvas course site, I have uploaded some additional job interview guidelines and practice questions that you can download and use for future reference. But for the moment, here are a few interview questions you may encounter, such as, what was an obstacle you overcame to achieve a goal? Describe a situation you've had with a difficult colleague. When were you unhappy with your performance? Now here, the interviewer is not necessarily looking for a weakness or a vulnerability, but they are trying to determine whether or not you recognize the fact that you're not perfect, and no one is, and if you can ask for help if you need it. How did you handle the situation when you had too many things to do and not enough time? How would you manage the workload in a short-staffed unit? How would you handle problem patients or families? And how would you cope with 3 emergency admissions at shift change? And here the interviewer is looking for how you could think on your feet and how you would demonstrate your dedication to the job or work under pressure, which, let's face it, in healthcare you often have to do. The recruiter may also ask you about courses you've taken. Which ones did you like the most or least, and why? Tell me about a time when you had a lot of difficulty working with a teammate. What could you have done to fix this problem? And again, they're not necessarily trying to target your personal vulnerabilities, but maybe asking what you learned from the experience. And that's another important thing to be able to do, of course, is learn from experience. The interviewer may even ask you, what do you feel is a weakness? And here, again, the interviewer wants to be sure that you're able to admit mistakes, ask for help when needed, and if you have strategies for overcoming challenges. After the interview, be sure and ask for the interviewer's business card. If he or she doesn't have one, then be sure you know the interviewer's name, including the correct spelling and contact information. For instance, maybe the interviewer's name is Karen. Well, is it spelled with a K or a C? Is it spelled with an E or a Y? There are many, many variations on what we consider common names, so make sure you know the correct spelling, because when you're writing your follow-up letter or email, nothing would convey a worse impression than misspelling the person's name. And you definitely should write a follow-up letter or email. I suggest sending it within 24 to 48 hours after the interview. You'll want to thank the person for meeting with you, perhaps recap any particularly important points. If there's something you weren't able to bring up during the interview, you can include it in the follow-up letter. And then, after you've done that, don't just sit and hope the phone rings. Follow up again after a reasonable time frame. Say if the interviewer told you you would hear something within a week, and the week has passed, try to get in touch and find out what's happening. If you got the job, great. Congratulations. But if you didn't, follow up anyway. You could send a short note or email to the interviewing. You could express your disappointment, but do not convey anger. You can use this to ask what qualifications and experience the successful candidate had that perhaps you didn't. You can ask if there's anything you might have said or done differently during the interview that would have changed the company's decision. Now, most of the time you won't get an answer, but if you do, you can use that feedback to refine your approach and interviewing techniques. If nothing else, a gracious follow-up may get you considered for a different position. Maybe the person hired won't remain with the organization and you'll be considered for the job again without having to go through the entire process all over. And it's very easy for people who already have jobs to tell you not to be discouraged or take it personally if you don't get one. So in the end, don't be discouraged or take it personally if you weren't the person hired. But be careful that any lack of confidence or sense of anger or frustration comes through in subsequent cover letters and interviews. The best advice I can offer you is don't give up hope and keep on working at it. Eventually, the right position for you will come along.